and welcome you watching Times Now with me, Akanksha Khajuria. Over the next half an hour, we'll tell you what is happening in West Asia. It is on the edge. The conflict between Israel, Iran and the United States, that has now taken a dangerous turn. Let's start with the breaking news that's coming in.
Well, first up, let's talk about this interview with New York Times. President Trump has now been citing the Venezuela examples. He says that what we did in Venezuela, he thinks that it is a perfect scenario. And when pressed on his plans for a transition of power, President Trump says that he hoped that Iran's military forces would simply turn over their weapons to the people. And President Trump once again has been now invoking and making an appeal to the people of Iran to actually turn over the regime there, saying that it will not be difficult either for Israel or the United States to maintain the intensity of the battle, even as he is possibly warned of more American casualties.
All right, so that's the latest that is coming in as far as Donald Trump is concerned. Remember, he has defended his attack on Iran, calling Iran supreme leader vile. And now he has also given a timeline of Operation Epic Fury, saying that it will, in fact, take 4 weeks or less for the operation to take place. In an interview with New York Times, Donald Trump has cited another attack on Venezuela. He has said, what we did there, I think, is the perfect scenario. When pressed on his plans for a transition on power, Mr. Trump said that he hoped Iran's military forces would simply turn over their weapons to the people.
All right. In the meantime, as we play out exactly what President Trump has now said, because the situation this time is very, very different. What he did as far as right in the beginning of the year with the Venezuelan president, who was picked up along with his wife and then was taken over to the United States of America, this time the situation is very, very different. President Donald Trump, however, has now mourned the deaths of the U.S. service members and has vowed that the United States will now avenge the fallen. Trump says that the military mission will now continue despite the losses, that combat operations will go on until U.S. strategic objectives are achieved. However, he has warned that there is a possibility of more casualties as the conflict continues. Let's listen in.
Earlier today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. And sadly, there will likely be more. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against basically civilization. They have waged war against civilization itself.
All right. Well, that seems to be the statement that is now coming in. Colonel Utkarsh Rathod is with us here in the studios as well, sir. Good morning. As far as the statements that have now come in from President Trump, first, that came in on Saturday, post the strikes were launched with Israel, and now this first statement is coming in post the killing of Khamenei. President Trump is not ruling out that this conflict may continue for more than 4 to 5 weeks. He says that U.S. and Israel is ready, however, saying that there is a possibility of more American casualties.
Yeah, drawing a parallel with the Venezuelan operation, it will be a little, incorrect. And Iran is a very big country, and I think President Trump's assessment of 4 to 5 weeks operation is quite pragmatic here. And he also said that there may be more casualties. You must brace yourself for more casualties and bad news.
All right, I want to ask you, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he has also said that the operation will continue till all the objectives are met. So by that, I think he's hinting towards the regime change. But do you think that is possible? Because U.S. has no boots there on the ground as far as Iran is concerned.
See, the objectives of these operations are actually regime change, of course. Then there is Iran's nuclear program, missile program, and Iran's stance towards Israel. Future stance towards Israel must get moderated. So here, boots on ground is often debated here, but the kind of force US and Israel have brought against Iran, I don't think boots on ground are required. but it is working on one presumption that Iranian public will rise in revolt and take charge of that. Even Trump is exhorting them every time that you take your lives in your hand and now change.
If that is even a possibility, because yes, there have been a few incidents where people have been rejoicing after the killing of Khamenei, but largely what we are looking at, the pictures that have been coming in post the killing of Khamenei, people are out on the streets and are in a state of mourning. Let's in the meantime also introduce our other guest joining us here on the broadcast. Good morning to you. Sierra Claire is a foreign policy analyst joining us. Captain Alok Bansal is also with us, Director, India Foundation, and Patikrit Payan, who is a geopolitical analyst, is also joining us here on the broadcast. So good morning to all of you. As far as Donald Trump's first address post Khamenei's killing is concerned, let's put that out for our viewers there, because Trump has now making this appeal once again to the Iranians to rise up and to overthrow the government, because Trump has also now gave this rather an assessment of what he has been saying, because what the people have to do, it is now up to them and the Iranian people as to they have to decide how they will be governed in the coming years. As Trump has now made this appeal to the Iranians, saying that it is up to you to take your country back. And a big message also coming in for the Iranian forces. President Trump says, especially to the IRGC, surrender or face death.
I once again urge the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranian military, police, to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help.
For more on this, let me go across to consulting editor Srinjoy Chaudhary. Good morning, Srinjoy. Donald Trump, on the expected lines, has defended the attack on Iran. He's also called Iran's supreme leader while, in fact, he's also given a timeline of the Operation Epic Fury that it will continue for the coming 4 weeks. Take us through the key highlights of the first address of Donald Trump after the killing of Iran's supreme leader.
Well, first of all, yes, you rightly said that he referred to the late Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, as vile. And the fact that Khamenei had American blood on his hands. Now, he hasn't mentioned how this is going to end. What he has said that this will continue, and he has enormous forces in the area. 2 carrier groups, guided missile destroyers, other ships, bombers. So there's no end in sight. There's no shortage of weapons. The point he is not making is how this regime change is going to happen. Because in the past, he's spoken about boots on the ground, and there would not be any boots on the ground. Now, how it's possible for the Iranian citizens to rise up in revolt and overthrow their government, this is something he believes that the Iranian people should do. Now, how that will happen, he believes that if the Iranian regime is sufficiently degraded, yes, the supreme leader has been killed, yes, about 40 generals have been killed, and senior people from the army, the Revolutionary Guards, the Navy have been taken out, then he believes that if this establishment is sufficiently degraded, then the people can rise up and take over. Now, whether that can happen or not, whether a regime change can happen only through bombing is something that Trump believes, but historically has never happened.
Well, that seems to be the situation there, because there can be multiple accounts, Sierra, and examples that can be given as far as when it comes to the U.S. involvement in any kind of conflict or war is concerned. It begins, but how do you believe that it will end? As far as, do you believe that there is a possibility of any de-escalation? Because Donald Trump, the president of the United States, doesn't seem to be talking about that. But in the meantime, we just have to put out another big breaking update, because Iran has now blamed President Trump for the collapse in diplomacy, saying that the talks were happening, negotiations were happening, and the deal was within reach, and the nuclear deal was almost done. But however, Iran is now blaming President Trump for derailing the talks, and that happened on that very day. As far as President Trump's earlier statement came in before these strikes were launched jointly by Israel and the US, saying that he was not very happy in the way that the talks were progressing. So, Sierra, what is your point of view as far as this statement coming in from President Trump?
Right. Well, first of all, President Trump is very different from past administrations that we've had in terms of, if you look at all of the policy changes that he's made to the Department of War and other elements of the United States national security ecosystem, the way that he approaches conflict and wages war in this case is very different. So I'm not concerned about forever wars with President Trump. I think that's completely opposite to his philosophy for when it comes to defense and engagements abroad. In terms of his statement about the breakdown of the talks, came because the Iranian regime did what they always did, and they didn't learn who they were dealing with. They made a lot of strategic miscalculations, and, I guess that worked for them for many years in the past. But President Trump, when he commits his time to negotiations, or in this case, his team's time, he expects results, and he wasn't getting them. And he was very clear that if he wasn't getting results, that he was going to have to use the military option.
All right. On that specific point, I want to bring in Captain Alok Bansal. I want to quote Donald Trump. He said that new Iranian leadership has signaled a willingness to talk and restart the negotiation. I want to ask you, is that a possibility? Because he's facing a lot of backlash for not allowing the negotiations to go on. And before that, he attacked Iran. He killed, in fact, the Iran's supreme leader as well. So is that a possibility as far as negotiations are concerned?
See, firstly, there is no doubt that that possibility does exist, because we need to understand that the Iranian president is actually a moderate. He has been trying to modernize Iran within the range that was feasible. Having said that, there is no doubt that negotiations were very close to culmination, as Omani leadership has very clearly indicated that Iran had gone far beyond what it had agreed under the Obama deal. And I think there was no valid reasons for this sort of an attack taking place. But it appears as if Israel convinced President Trump, and his personal stakes, business stakes in Middle East, actually persuaded him to go for this sort of an attack. But having done so, if some time is given to the Iranian leadership, and if the moderates manage to get over the clerical overhang that exists in Iranian democracy over the democratically elected government, you could possibly see the democratic regime reaching out to US, because they may want to consolidate and take the regime away from the existing policies that it has been pursuing, which was far more theocratic and religious in orientation. So that's a feasibility. But at this moment, when the war is going on, to my mind, it will be very difficult for any Iranian regime to publicly acknowledge that they have reached out to Trump for negotiations.
No, because as far as the Iranian regime is saying that they will continue, when it comes to the succession in the government, it is not going to be affected with the conflict or with the crisis. So there has been a new role of the leadership that has now been announced. There is going to be a 3-member governing council as well. And Ayatollah Arafi is now being said to be the interim supreme leader. So this is something that is now coming in as far as when it comes to, removal of the Iranian regime. That seems to be a difficult task. And President Trump now seems to be making that appeal to the Iranian people themselves, because he seems to be saying that thousands of them have been killed by the Iranian regime brutally in the last 2 to 3 months, ever since the uprising began in Iran in December. Let's in the meantime also talk about US now releasing this fresh footage of the attack, where the US forces have now said that this is a bold strike that they carried out on Iran, and mainly the action is to eliminate the threats. As the US forces, they have been continuing with their strikes, and a footage that has now been released on part of the US Central Command, which talks about and which which shows how the U.S. forces are now taking bold action to eliminate imminent threats posed by the Iranian regime as the strikes continue. So several targets that have been hit, and as far as when it comes to over 40 top Iranian officials have now been eliminated in the last 48 hours alone, ever since the strike, the joint strikes that was carried out both by the US and by Israel. And Israel, meanwhile, has also been carrying out multiple strikes, and that too in the heart of Tehran, and has also launched attacks on Lebanon after Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets on northern Israel. But this seems to be a video that has now been released by CENTCOM, as it can be shown when it comes to the areas that are being targeted in particular. These are the strikes that are being carried out by the US. So US President Donald Trump, however, has warned that the attacks on Iran will continue until all of Washington's objectives are achieved, and however has promised that he will avenge the killing of 3 Americans, but however has said that there is a possibility that the casualty figure of Americans dying in this conflict may also rise. So Akansha, we have another round of breaking update coming.
All right.